Have you ever caught yourself saying something that wasn't entirely true? Not because you wanted to deceive someone in a dramatic way, but because in that moment, it simply felt easier than explaining the full reality of how you actually felt. Not a catastrophic lie that destroys trust overnight. Not a carefully planned manipulation, but a small adjustment of the truth that seems harmless, almost invisible, and completely socially acceptable. Maybe it happened this morning, when someone asked how you were doing and you automatically replied, "I'm fine," even though your mind was restless and your body felt heavy with unspoken stress. Maybe it happened when you said, "I was busy," when in reality you were overwhelmed, exhausted, or simply unwilling to open yourself emotionally at that moment. These moments feel small, almost insignificant, and yet they reveal something deeply human about the way we navigate social life. And here is the uncomfortable truth. That does not make you dishonest in a moral sense. It makes you adaptive in a complex emotional world. Because most lies are not born from cruelty or manipulation, but from a subtle attempt to maintain stability in situations where complete honesty might feel too sharp, too exposing, or too risky. Human interaction is layered with expectations, sensitivities, fragile egos, and invisible tensions, and unfiltered truth can sometimes cut through those layers with more force than we are prepared to handle. Imagine speaking every thought exactly as it appears in your mind, without editing, without softening, without protecting anyone, including yourself. Imagine saying, "I feel insecure around you," or "I'm jealous," or "I don't actually agree," or "I don't have the energy to care right now." Brutal honesty might sound admirable in theory, but in practice it can feel destabilizing, confrontational, and even emotionally violent. So instead, we soften our words, we replace intensity with politeness, and we adjust reality just enough to keep social harmony intact. Small lies act like social lubricants, quietly reducing friction and preventing unnecessary conflict, which is why they are so easy to justify. But the more frequently we adjust reality in subtle ways, the more natural that adjustment becomes, until eventually we stop noticing when authenticity turns into performance. And once that line blurs, especially internally, we may no longer recognize the moment when we begin to distort the truth not only for others, but for ourselves. To understand why people lie, we must look beneath behavior and examine the emotional forces that drive it, because lying is rarely about the surface-level words. It is about the fear that exists underneath them. At its core, lying is a psychological shield that activates when we perceive emotional threat. Whether that threat is rejection, humiliation, punishment, abandonment, or simply the discomfort of being misunderstood. The nervous system reacts far more quickly than logic does, and when it senses danger, even subtle social danger, it chooses protection over transparency almost automatically. For many people, this pattern was not formed in adulthood, but was shaped in childhood, in environments where honesty did not always feel safe. Imagine a child who tells the truth and is met with anger instead of understanding, or who expresses vulnerability and is met with dismissal instead of empathy. The nervous system does not analyze the situation philosophically. It simply records the outcome. Truth led to pain. And when the next similar situation appears, the body responds before conscious thought has time to intervene. So the child learns to hide, to adjust, to conceal parts of reality in order to reduce emotional explosion. Relief follows that concealment, and relief reinforces the behavior, turning it into a protective strategy. Years later, the context may be completely different. The danger may no longer exist, but the nervous system continues to operate as if it does. The shield remains raised, even in safe environments, because it once worked. And what once ensured survival now quietly limits intimacy, because genuine closeness requires being seen without constant filtration. Beyond protection, Lying also serves the need for belonging, which is one of the most fundamental human drives. We are biologically wired to seek acceptance, because isolation once meant danger in evolutionary terms, and that wiring still influences modern relationships. When we sense that honesty might threaten connection, we instinctively soften it or replace it with something safer. We say, "It's fine," even when it isn't, because preserving harmony feels more urgent than expressing discomfort. We convince ourselves that we are protecting others from hurt, when in reality, we may also be protecting ourselves from confrontation or emotional tension. But when truth is consistently sacrificed for peace, relationships may remain stable on the surface, while depth slowly disappears underneath. Then there is identity, the image we construct and defend in the eyes of others and in our own minds. We want to be seen as competent, composed, capable, and emotionally balanced. So we subtly adjust narratives to align with that image. We highlight successes while minimizing failures. We present confidence while hiding doubt. And we share curated versions of ourselves that feel more acceptable. In a world where visibility is constant and comparison is unavoidable, this performance becomes even more pronounced. Yet beneath that performance often lies a quiet fear of being exposed as insufficient, imperfect, or ordinary. And sometimes, adjusting reality feels safer than revealing vulnerability. Lying can also create a temporary illusion of control in situations where life feels uncertain or overwhelming. When external circumstances feel unpredictable, controlling information can provide a brief sense of stability. Saying, "I've handled it," or "everything's fine," can momentarily reduce anxiety because it creates the appearance of order in chaos. But illusions require maintenance, and maintaining distortion consumes emotional energy. The tension of holding up a narrative that does not fully align with reality often produces more anxiety than the original uncertainty itself. Finally, for some individuals, lying becomes habitual, not because they consciously choose dishonesty, but because repetition has turned protection into reflex. The response arises before awareness, shaped by past experiences where concealment once prevented harm. And yet, habits are patterns, not identities, and patterns can shift when brought into conscious awareness. The most powerful lie isn't the one we tell other people. It's the one we tell ourselves. "I'm fine. It doesn't matter. I don't care." These words sound harmless, but they protect us from facing something uncomfortable. Self-deception protects the ego, because admitting the truth might require change. Admitting fear might require vulnerability. Admitting dissatisfaction might require action. And action feels uncertain. So the mind softens reality. It creates a version of the story that feels safer and more stable. But growth doesn't happen inside comfort. Truth can challenge the identity you've built. It can expose patterns you've avoided. And that's why it matters. When you stop lying to yourself, clarity appears. You begin to see what you've been protecting. You begin to notice old survival strategies. And once you see them, you have a choice. Maybe the goal isn't to eliminate every lie. Maybe it's to understand what the lie is protecting. Instead of asking, "Why am I lying?" ask, "What feels unsafe right now?" That question creates awareness. And awareness creates space. Honesty grows in safety, not in fear. People who lie aren't villains. They are humans, using strategies that once worked. The more safety we create in ourselves and in others, the less we need those strategies. So the next time you feel the urge to adjust the truth, pause. Ask yourself, is this protection still necessary? Or is it an old shield in a safe room? Because sometimes the strongest act is allowing one small, honest moment to exist, even quietly, even imperfectly. And that's where real change begins.